Hey all, welcome to How to Fix It. I'm John Avlon. Now, the purpose of this podcast is to focus on finding solutions to the problems we face, not just endlessly fixating on the problems themselves. And arguably the biggest problem, and for Democrats, the biggest opportunity in this administration is corruption. Why corruption? Because the Trump administration has effectively decriminalized corruption. They've done it consecutively, consistently, gutting branches of the Department of Justice. And it's particularly relevant on this weekend in which Americans will be protesting at No Kings events around the country, because successful pro-democracy movements across the world have consistently focused on corruption. Corruption is the thing that tends to bring down autocratic aligned regimes. Corruption is the thing that resonates with folks because it feels fundamentally unfair, particularly when working people are struggling just to get by. And that's why the emphasis should be on corruption. Our guest is Senator Andy Kim from New Jersey. He's a pioneering first Korean American to represent the Senate ever. But he also took office after replacing a senator, Bob Menendez, who was convicted on corruption charges, a rare conviction in this era, I might add. Senator Kim, welcome to How to Fix It.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to just begin by listing really a litany of corrupt actions or actions to not prosecute corruption that the administration has taken since really out of the gate. I mean, this was a concerted plan and effort. I'll just read a few. Disbanding the Foreign Influence Task Force at the Department of Justice. Disbanding the FBI Public Corruption Squad. Gutting the Public Integrity Section. Dismantling anti-kleptocracy teams. Ending DOJ Crypto Crimes Task Force. Ending White House independence from DOJ criminal reviews. And that's beyond the Trump family's enrichment in the White House, which is unprecedented. Giving pardons to people whose family members or who themselves have given donations. Talk about a swamp. This is an unprecedented amount of corruption and self-enrichment from any administration. How do you see it as a member of the U.S. Senate?
Well, I've never seen anything quite like this, and I don't think America has ever seen anything quite like this. I was thinking back to Trump's first administration and, the concerns that we were raising about his hotel in D.C. and how, that funds can go into his own bank account. What we're seeing now is magnitudes beyond that. I mean, it is an industrial scale level of corruption that is happening, and something hell-bent to just try to weaken our government's ability to be able to monitor and prosecute and to be able to engage in efforts to be able to stem the tide. And so, yes, it's something that I hope the American people are seeing. It doesn't matter whether it's, $50,000 in a kava bag or just what we're seeing on an industrial level with the president and his family enriching themselves off of crypto. These are the types of things that we're seeing, that Donald Trump is somebody who is trying to leave the Oval Office in a few years much, much, much more wealthy than he is going in. And that profiteering off of the Oval Office is something that, again, I hope we can build a movement around, saying that is not right.
We need to build that movement. We need to make that case. And that means consistently making the case. You referenced two things that are worth underlining. First of all, this is unprecedented. Right? This isn't hyperbole. This isn't partisan spin. I mean, famously, Jimmy Carter put his peanut farm in a blind conservatorship before he became president. What we're dealing with now is, land deals in foreign countries, giving pardons to people who make donations or invest in Trump companies, particularly crypto companies. It's unprecedented, quite literally, and to the tune of billions of dollars by some estimates. The second thing is, you mentioned $50,000 in a bag. This is the accusation leveled at Tom Homan, the director of ICE enforcement, was caught on an FBI wire in 2024 in September, accepting $50,000 in cash in a bag. This is not usually how people are paid. Your predecessor got in trouble because he was hiding gold bars in his closet. Democrat, I should add. But when the administration seems to have just decided that they're not going to look into it or enforce the law with regard to Tom Homan. J.D. Vance said as much when confronted by George Stephanopoulos. As a senator, as a member of a co-equal branch of government, what can the Senate do to actually insist that the executive branch enforce laws? And what do your Republican colleagues say behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, the points that you raised, I mean, it's absolutely absurd. I mean, with JD Vance's interview, he's simultaneously saying, "Oh, well, I'm not aware of any video, but I'm absolutely certain that Tom Homan didn't break the law." I mean, it's just shows just how they're tripping over themselves and tying themselves in knots here, and it's just it's flat disgusting. Honestly, the Senate. Congress should be able to have these investigations into this, should be able to have the efforts to be able to mobilize. I'm on the Homeland Security Committee. We have been pressing to be able to get investigations. We're pressing, I'm asking and demanding that we have the video of Homan released so we can see with our own eyes what happened. But the Republicans that hold the gavel in the Senate and in Congress as a whole are just continuing to give into this cover up, on so many different levels that they know is wrong. And I just find that to be so just infuriating, that they know it's wrong. But honestly, whether it's because they just want to continue to support this administration or out of fear, I mean, a number of my Republican senators have talked to me about the fear that they come across in terms of whether or not to stand up to the Trump administration. I've seen how a number of them have been called out and their careers attacked by this president directly when they try to stand up to him. And that sends a signal not just to that particular senator, but to all Republicans that if you get out of line, this president can end your career and make your life, a living hell.
This is the age-old story of fear and greed and how it is corrupting and leads to, society's and individuals' downfall. But I want to press you a little bit more about when your Republican colleagues confess to feeling fear. Explain that a little further. Fear of what? Fear of the mob? Fear of violence? Fear of the president? Or is it just fear for their own careers?
Yeah, many of them, it's more about fear for their own careers. Just the idea that this is a president that with one tweet can end your political career. Get somebody to run against you, or just tank your support. But it grows beyond that. I mean, I've seen how some of my colleagues, when they take a vote that the president then attacks, I see the hate and the vitriol that they are on the receiving end on. I actually see people following them through the halls of Congress, taunting them, ridiculing them to their face, not to mention what's happening on social media. I had Republican colleagues in the House that told me about how they do fear for their lives or the safety of their families with the threats that they're getting to their homes.
And from their own political base. I want to emphasize that. This isn't some Antifa phantom menace. This is, violence wherever it comes from is 100% wrong. But specifically, these Republicans are telling you they're afraid from the far right for violence against them and their families. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. For standing up to the Trump administration in whatever way that they were.
I mean, look, Teddy Roosevelt said something once about the fact if you're unwilling to do the right thing because you're afraid for your career, or you probably shouldn't be in politics. But I guess that train has sailed for the time
Yeah, it's
being.
just like, I kind of broke it down into three ways. And when I was in the House of Representatives, I said, you have some kind of traditional conservatives, of which there are very few left. You have the crazies, and you can, fill in the blank Mad Libs of whatever name, you comes to mind. But then you have the cowards, you have people that know better. And it's very tough for me to think through what's worse, someone who truly believes the crazy things that they're saying and what Trump is doing, or the cowards that know better but choose not to do anything because they're looking out for their own career. This job is a good job. It's not that good though, that you want to like twist yourself in knots and like, betray your own integrity. And like, I just, it's one of those things where like, do you not have a mirror in your house so you don't have to like look yourself in the eyes? Like it's really tough to see this happening.
What lessons did you take from the circumstances that befell your predecessor? I mean, you took on the machine in your own party, in your own state. Menendez had been a very powerful member of the U.S. Senate. There was clearly a quid pro quo. Gold bars don't usually end up in somebody's home. But what lessons did you take from his downfall and the cojones it took to step up in the face of a lot of pressure to wait in line?
Yeah. No, I was excited to talk to you about this because your podcast, about how to fix it. Like, I took on the machine politics in New Jersey, and we won. We beat it, not in entirety, but we were able to actually go to court and change the ballot. So what I learned from that process, first of all, is there's a tremendous amount of apathy out there when it comes to our politics. And I've often said that the opposite of democracy is apathy. It's if we feel a sense of helplessness. It's not dictatorship per se. It's this idea if we feel helpless and we lose our voice and allow for authoritarianism to rise. But in New Jersey, there was I remember when I talked to my neighbor the day of the indictment of Menendez. I went over. Our kids were playing in the front yard, and I was standing next to him, and I was like, "Well, what do you think about this indictment of the senator?" And my neighbor was just like, "That's Jersey. That's just that's Jersey politics." And look, I mean, we got a chuckle out of it, but it's just sad, that like 84% of people in New Jersey believe that their elected officials are corrupt. Like that is a staggering number. Like how does democracy function with that much distrust? And so when I first started to run, when I stepped up to run against the, Menendez and ultimately, the machine politics of New Jersey, I had a lot of people just tell me like, we believe in the same thing you believe in. We just don't think you can do it. We don't think that, you can be able to change this. It's too big. You're not going to be able to take this on. Many have tried and failed. And I think what I learned is once we are able to kind of punch through and show the vulnerability, I think we were able to build the momentum to ultimately build not just a campaign for Senate, but a movement for standing up to corruption in New Jersey. And that's ultimately what we built. A movement that brought together not just Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. And I really think that right now in this day and age, again, if 84% of people think that their elected officials are corrupt, that is the widest, coalition that I think you can build right now. It's a coalition that can transcend partisanship. If we build an anti-corruption coalition. So what I'll just say is once we were able to show some sense of capacity to win, to actually be successful, especially when I sued in court. And again, that was one of the most nerve-wracking decisions of my life, to literally sue the state of New Jersey, including the Democratic Party, my own party. That was really tough.
Explain for people what the suit was about, because
that's a good point. So in New Jersey, the corruption was structural. It was systemic. It wasn't just about certain individuals holding a lot of power, like Senator Menendez. It's that these party bosses, these leaders, they could actually determine where your placement on the ballot is. So they would give their preferential placement on the ballot to their endorsed candidates. And someone like myself that was not endorsed by the establishment could be literally on the other side of the page. In fact, I saw one example where the name was literally on the back side of the ballot and people didn't even know there was a back side of the ballot. So, these are the types of systemic corruption. And sadly, look, it was my own party that was doing a lot of this, Republicans too, but the Democrats were certainly involved. So I decided to stand up and sue the state to change the ballot. Went to federal court, took it to the Third Circuit, and won. And we were able to change that forever. And I'm really proud of that. And we now see, in the governor's race, in the primary a couple months ago, we had a legitimate primary for the first time in a long time, where like multiple candidates were there, and it was a weird experience going into election day, not knowing who's going to win. Because normally elections in New Jersey are a coronation rather than an actual election.
It's a wonderful example of you can fight City Hall. I mean, you'd been elected in 2018, and you had the initiative to say I'm running early when the corruption was evident for everyone to see, but Menendez hadn't stepped down. You had the determination to stay in and sue and take an injustice to court. And you ultimately won on the back of, which I love this, an anti-corruption coalition. That's what we need to build, not only in New Jersey, but nationally.
Nationally. Yeah, I mean, I think a reform agenda, an anti-corruption agenda is powerful, not just in New Jersey, it's in the entire country. There was a Pew study that said 74% of Americans, all Americans, believe that the federal government is corrupt. This is a deep seated level of distrust. We live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in government in modern American history. And look, I really want to hit home to people that this isn't just about the corruption. It's because the people are basically experiencing a corruption tax. They are paying more because of this corruption. It is because Donald Trump is trying to, give payback to all these billionaires and millionaires that supported his campaign that he prominently had on stage during the inauguration. It's the reason he's giving tax cuts to them that we have to pay higher healthcare costs. It's because of the corruption that we're seeing endemic, throughout our government, that, this is a government that's trying to cut programs like women, infants, children's WIC programs or SNAP benefits to those that are hungry in America, even though we're the richest, most powerful country in the world. So I don't mean, again, it's not just about gold bars and wads of cash in kava bags. It's also about just the prioritization of this government and the fact that right now this is an administration that is weaponizing that for their own personal benefit. And I talked to this one voter, actually was an independent voter just the other day in New Jersey, and I asked her, what would you want to say to Donald Trump if you had a chance to? And she said, I would want to remind him that this is our money, the American people's money. This is not Donald Trump's personal bank account. And I think that really gets it. If you want to build a movement, if you want to build this coalition, yes, people are disgusted by the corruption. But as I said, because so many people feel apathetic and they feel like the corruption is so endemic, the only way you can really mobilize them is if you hit home to them how this affects their family's budget, how this affects their costs. Why is it that they are not living the kind of life that they want to live? Well, part of the answer is that, politics has become a way for the wealthy to get even wealthier. And I think that's why, you see so much energy behind the efforts that me and others are trying to lead to ban stock trading and ownership in Congress.
Let's dig into that. Let's dig into that, because you proposed, there's the Stock Act. It's been in the House. You proposed in the Senate a bill with a different name, but explain what it would do and why it's necessary from your perspective and the opposition you foresee.
Yeah, well, look, first and foremost, I think people are seeing they probably heard of this effort to try to ban members of Congress from owning and trading stocks. I'll give you an example. When I was in the House of Representatives, I was on the Armed Services Committee, and there are members of Congress on that committee and in Congress at large that own stock in Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing. We are literally making decisions that will impact these particular companies or these industries and sectors. How can we assure the American people that we are not in it to enrich ourselves and our stock portfolio rather than thinking about what's best for the American people? The way I say it is that I work a job whose job description is in the Constitution of the United States. That's a deeply humbling experience to have. We should be held to the highest of standard. And I remember we were in a hearing the other day about this, and one of my Senate colleagues is like, well, we need to have outsiders working in government. We need business people in government. They're not going to do so if you're going to force them to divest from individual stocks. We should be incentivizing them to get into government. And I told him this. I'm like, look, we work jobs whose job descriptions are in the Constitution. There are only 535 of us in America that can write federal law out of a country of 340 million people. I don't want to have to beg someone to want to do this job. We should want people that want to serve the country and want to do it for the right reasons. And so I said to him, if the worry about divesting from individual stocks into diversified mutual funds, if that's too much for you to think through in order to be able to take this job, then maybe it's not the right job for you. Maybe you don't feel the call to serve enough if you feel the call to increase your stock portfolio. And what I'm trying to do is not just about members of Congress. My bill is trying to set a single standard across all three branches of government. Right now, to be able to hold the president, the vice president, the cabinet senior executive branch officials. And also, look, the Supreme Court and federal judges, I mean, they are making rulings specifically on on actions that could impact industries, could impact businesses. We all see information that could be very valuable in terms of trading stocks. We need to make sure the American people have faith that we're working for them and not about just what can benefit our own personal wealth. And you see that first and foremost with the profiteering happening in the Oval Office right now.
And look, it's a reminder also that if any private individual did what members of Congress can do, they would be charged with insider trading. It's the only place where insider trading is effectively decriminalized. And the idea of one government, three branches, one standard, I like it. Who could be against that? Well, the people who are against it are probably telling on themselves.
I have had colleagues of mine literally come to me and just get in my face, just being like, "Are you saying I'm corrupt? Like, are you attacking me on this?" And I said, like, "Look, like, I'm not going after any individual person here. I'm just saying that this is something we should be willing to sacrifice and in order to be able to restore trust." But I just share that with you to tell you like just how heated it can be up here on Capitol Hill about this issue.
For sure, especially right now. Now, speaking of heated, earlier this month, with regard to the shutdown and some of the retaliation that the Trump administration is directing at federal workers, at so-called Democrat workers, canceling infrastructure projects that directly affect your state and mine, you've accused the Trump administration of mob boss politics.
It's true.
I think that mob bosses also enrich themselves while they strong arm folks. But build that out, because I think that's a phrase that can stick.
Yeah, and look, it's a phrase that people in New Jersey understand. There's a reason people call it the Soprano State, which I would like to change, but it shows that
I'd go Bruce Springsteen State personally, but I understand.
I would much rather it be called that. But like, look, right now, Donald Trump literally said that he's going to terminate the funding for the Gateway Tunnel project. Now, this is a tunnel that is not just about helping New Jersey and New York, it's for our entire country. In fact, the Secretary of Transportation has talked about it before as a national priority that we have this tunnel, because if the train line gets severed in the Northeast Corridor, it would be economically catastrophic to our country.
I think the technical term is we'd all be screwed.
Yes, we'd be screwed. And Donald Trump is somebody right now who's just thinking about this money in terms of how to screw over his political opponents, or the word that he would use is enemy, which I just think is a despicable word. We should never use the word enemy when referring to other Americans, even if we disagree with them politically. But that's what the Trump administration said, because they say it's a war from within, right? We're in a war here within our country. And so he's withholding this money for the Gateway Tunnel as just political retribution. And this is exactly
he's frank about that, by the way, right?
Yeah. He talked about Chuck Schumer and wanted to get back at Chuck Schumer, and like that's like totally like we've seen the movies, right? Like that's that's a nice tunnel you got. Like it'd be a shame if something were to happen to it, type thing, And it's just meant to try to intimidate and dominate. And again, like that woman told me, that independent voter told me, like this is not Donald Trump's money. This is the American people's money. I helped pass the infrastructure law.
Yes.
We have money from that infrastructure law going to every corner of America, not just to the districts and the states that voted for that infrastructure law. Like, how horrible would it be if I said, oh, well, you didn't vote for it, so you shouldn't get any money. Like, that should only go to the areas that voted for it. If our politics goes in that direction, which is what Donald Trump and Russell Vought and Stephen Miller want, we will lose this democracy. It will literally just become a nation of patronage networks. And that's exactly what I've seen in failed states, in authoritarian nations. And you see it now when people are kissing up to Donald Trump. I mean, I just saw that he had like a dinner party for people who donated to his ballroom that he wants to build at the White House. Look at that list and think about the interests that those companies and those individuals have This is a way where they can basically funnel money to the president and his priorities in order to be able to get access, which is what they get.
And we should say you worked in the State Department, and so you know of what you speak when you talk about failed states, and these are the stakes, right? I mean, these are the stakes. I'll say just to the Wall Street Journal this week, yet another story that will not get the attention it deserves, but would in any other quote unquote normal time. Trump team to overhaul IRS to probe left-leaning groups. I mean, that's an institutional commitment to not just undermine nonpartisan enforcement, but to persecute enemies. That's mob boss politics.
Yeah, and then look at the other side of that, which is like with like Mayor Adams, right? And like
Yep.
telling the DOJ not to move forward with a case that they have because this is someone who did a favor to the president. And look, that DOJ official that pressed for the dropping of that is now a federal judge, because he got awarded that, like the fact that, that Alina Habba gets the U.S. attorney's position in New Jersey. These are the payments to those that carry out the mob boss tactics.
So we've only got a few minutes left, but I want to make a couple points clear. First of all, you say as a member of the minority, even the U.S. Senate, that there's very little that you believe the minority can do to put a check on this kind of corruption. It's all about winning elections and getting the majority either in the House or the Senate or both. Is that correct? Or are there levers you can pull?
There's definitely more we should do. And this is, again, like, for instance, right now, we do not have the Republican Party doesn't exist. It's been captured by this MAGA movement. Yeah, and say what you will about Donald Trump, but he is a movement leader, and we see him, dominating the Republican Party. As a result, this is not just business as usual. This is not a situation where we can think about this through the normal political lens of political tools. We need to build that movement. And I think that movement needs to be, or should be, an anti-corruption movement to be able to mobilize against what the MAGA world did. And I was able to help build a movement in New Jersey without necessarily using the levers of my legislative powers in the Congress. We were able to go out and really engage people and channel their energy. We have all these people that are going to be out protesting, and that's a good thing. And we're, it's important that they can have that ability. But then what? It's not just about the energy. It's about building sustained attention.
It's a call to action.
Yeah, that is a call to action. So look, like, I hope people, go and support these efforts we're trying to do to stop stock trading and ownership in Congress and in government. Is that going to fix everything? No, but it'll be a win, and it'll be something we can build on in the same way that my legal win, standing up against the machine politics, has now given way to so many people to be able to now run for office in New Jersey and feel like they can take on the machine. If we try to press on the campaign finance, highlight the dangers of the Citizens United decision, educate the American people about these decisions that are coming forward, whether it's in the Supreme Court, their efforts that may very well gut the Voting Rights Act, that is in conjunction with what they are doing on Citizens United and super PACs, as well as gerrymandering. That is a form of corruption that is trying to take away people's power. So look, yes, I cannot stop Donald Trump through non-binding resolutions in the Senate and efforts there, but it can draw attention for people. And I say that as someone who ran for Congress in 2018. I never ran for office before. I was only 34 years old when I first started. But on a message of anti-corruption, I beat an incumbent who won his previous election by 20 points. A Republican incumbent won 20 points in 2016. I won by 1 point in 2018. I did a 21-point flip to win a district that Trump won twice. And I did it because of this connection between healthcare costs that people are facing, especially prescription drug costs, as well as this congressman's efforts to just suck in money to his campaign from pharmaceutical companies and other healthcare lobbies. we were able to build a coalition that won that election. So that hopefully gives people a sense of hope. I want people to fight against the apathy and the helplessness that's out there. And I want us to be able to build a real movement, an anti-corruption movement that can stand up against so much of the damages that we're seeing right now to our country.
Well, that headline, which is how to build an anti-corruption movement to take on mob boss politics, that's a good one. Your story, a 21-point swing as someone who recently ran for Congress, that is deeply impressive. I want to be respectful for your time, but I've got one last question for you,
Sure.
which is that in New York and New Jersey in 2024, saw the biggest per capita shifts back towards Donald Trump. You won in 2018 in that backlash. And now there's a governor's race. Micah Sherrill, one of your former colleagues, really impressive centrist veteran. But, the last race was much closer than people expected. And this race might be as well. How do you understand that per capita shift towards Trump in the last election? And how are you seeing this gubernatorial election in New Jersey that's coming right up in a few weeks?
Yeah, look, what I'll say is that, again, people are concerned about affordability right now. The high costs are just dominating people's minds. A woman that I talked to said it just feels like death from a thousand cuts, just housing, healthcare, food costs, education costs, etc. So, I mean, look, when we have affordability challenges and we got a Democratic governor, Democratic leaders in New Jersey, and we got problems with our NJ Transit and other things. People were upset and they're frustrated, and they wanted to see change. But I think what they're seeing is that Donald Trump, he lied to them. He tricked them. He made them think that he was going to work for them. Instead, he's working to enrich himself and his billionaire buddies. What I just often say is like, look, Donald Trump has made billions of dollars since January 20th. How much money has your family made? And I think it's very clear that he is winning on this. He is taking all of our money. In fact, he's making our prices go up with the tariffs, and everything else he's in. And where's that tariff money going? It's not coming to us. So that's what I think the people of New Jersey are seeing. And I think that, they're going to see someone like Jack Ciattarelli, who's running for governor on the Republican side. He's somebody that said, he can't think of a single thing that he disagrees with Trump on. He gave Trump an A rating on a report card during the recent debate. He's somebody that said he's not going to sue the Trump administration if he's governor for things that could hurt our state. Like, that's absolutely the wrong kind of person. And again, because he's worried about his own career. Jack Ciattarelli's been running for governor longer than my kids have been alive. This is someone who is more interested in the title rather than the responsibilities that come with it. And I think people see that as part of that, that mob boss tactics that are out there, is that Jack Ciattarelli is going to work for Donald Trump, not the people of New Jersey. So, that's what I'm hoping people see. And we'll try to build off of that. And hopefully that'll set a tone for the country in the midterms. I was telling people in New Jersey, we're the Iowa and New Hampshire of the midterm elections. Like, we really set the tone for what happens in the rest of the country. So we have to point the way in terms of how we steer away from this tailspin that we're in as a country right now from Donald Trump's dangerous actions.
I think those are exactly the stakes. I think it's exactly the right frame. Senator Andy Kim, anti-corruption crusader from New Jersey. Thank you very much for joining us on How to Fix It.
Thanks so much for having me.